Hey everybody. So very recently, the State University of New York, SUNY, Columbia Green, is a part of the vast SUNY network. University of Albany, Rockport, lots of community colleges. SUNY now requires every SUNY graduate to take a class that qualifies in the category of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. And this class qualifies for that because we talk a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. And I'm going to be working this semester to highlight that even more. This is sort of the kickoff video for that. And there are three, those of you who are going to be teachers, pay close attention. Learning outcomes, you may already be learning about those, but there are learning outcomes. And I'm going to roll through the three learning outcomes associated with diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. And talk about Phyllis Wheatley in the context of these outcomes. Number one, describe the historical and contemporary societal factors that shape the development of individual and group identity involving race, class, and gender. Well, a lot of you already put your finger on that, right? A lot of you asked the question, hey, she's a black enslaved woman and she's writing a poem, and one of you asked, did other slaves read this? So you are already good at this, right? The historical context of this poem, you go, it really is a head scratcher. She, however, was taught to read and write by her owners, encouraged to do so. Her owners helped her get published, and she was writing, though, for a white audience, as we said earlier. And reading these poems today, I think, I'm not black, full disclosure, I am 100% white. I've had my DNA tested and that's what it showed. I think a black person, reading this today would say, duh, here's a black woman who by some stroke of luck wound up not necessarily enslaved, but enslaved in a condition where her innate intelligence and her work ethic could rise up, and she could give us these great poems. So very unusual then for a black woman to be a published poet. Today, it's not unusual at all. At President Biden's inaugural, a black, very young woman, a black poet, read one of her poems. At President Clinton's inaugural in 1994, I believe, a black poet read. So that's a pretty big deal. And black poets, women, male and female, are widely published and widely read today. Outcome number two, analyze the role that complex networks of social structures and systems play in the creation, perpetuation, and the dynamics of power, privilege, and oppression and opportunity. Complex networks of social structures. Christianity, churches, right? And in this time period, in most churches, slavery was not under attack, right? Slavery was not under attack. Many churches, the minister got up all over America and talked about how good slavery was for these poor, dark people, skin and soul, coming from Africa. That's what many preachers preached. So enslavement, and here in the Hudson Valley, the Dutch Reformed Church, were very closely linked. Many people owned slaves who went to church, and they would have heard things in the pulpits, again, all over America, about the virtues of slavery and how good it was for everyone. So that is a social structure and a system that perpetuated that dynamic of power and oppression. Apply the principles of rights, access, equity, and autonomous participation. You go, Phyllis Wheatley. Again, she is the exception that proves the rule. She autonomously participated. She wrote these poems and participated in society and advocating for social justice, advocating for equality without question. And briefly touching on her other poems, she goes after the most elite institution in America, definitely the most elite institution in America today, at least for higher ed, Harvard, when she goes to the University of Cambridge. We've got a video about that. An enslaved black woman is writing a poem telling Harvard students to behave. She's cool, right? Talk about cool. And she writes a letter to George Washington, a slave owner, the head of the army, cheering him on for independence. And he wrote her a letter back. So she really engaged with the elite people. She gained access through sheer force and words to the power structures of the late 1700s. Phyllis Wheatley, diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice. She was a pioneer in the field, even though those are not words that she would have used. We can certainly apply them to her today. And I think she is a role model for us today, what, 260 years later. We'll talk more about diversity, equity, and inclusion as the semester rolls along.